I'd like to introduce our first panelist today, Laio Sobrinho, who will discuss technologies available for remote management and monitoring rotationally grazed pastures. Laio is a research associate at the Technology Access Center for Livestock Production, where he leads projects related to grazing management, including validating novel technologies and practices with the potential to improve productivity and sustainability on farm. Laio comes from a family of cattle producers in Brazil, where he assisted in the operation and management of his family's herd and pastures. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Forestry and is completing a Master of Science at the University of Alberta, where he studies the effect of adaptive rotational grazing systems on the sequestration of carbon in Canadian grasslands. Welcome, Laio.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for inviting me, and good morning, everyone. As Matthew said, my name is Laio Sobrinho, and I'm going to present about technologies available for remotely monitoring rotationally grazed pastures. So I'm part of the Technology Access Center for Livestock Production. I'm a research associate there. The TAC is an NSERC-funded center based at Oates College. We just conduct applied research on anything related to livestock production and ways to improve efficiency in the ranch. We were established in 2016. I started working in 2021 at the TAC. And our three main areas of focus is improving animal health and welfare, increasing production efficiencies, and enhancing environmental sustainability. So anything or any technology or practice related to improving grazing management fits within our three main categories, three main areas of focus. So I'm not going to go too much into how rotationally grazing works. I assume everyone is somehow familiarized with the concept of rotational grazing. I'm just going to talk about why it's beneficial and how we can help producers to implement it through the use of technology. So as we know, compared to conventional grazing, rotational grazing sequesters more carbon by allowing plants to have deeper roots. So we have better hydrological functioning in the soil and more productivity. We have here on the right, we have a conventionally grazed soil right by a rotationally grazed soil. This was collected in Saskatchewan, in the land of this gentleman named Dennis, and he had two paddocks side by side, one conventionally grazed and then the one rotationally grazed for 10 years. So in this picture here, it's a very good way to see what happens in the soil when it's rotationally grazed. And when I say rotationally grazed, that includes anything that producers call holistic grazing, AMP grazing, mob grazing. There's a lot of ways to call the same thing, but it's basically the same concept. So once you rotationally graze your pastures, you have deeper roots, you have more soil cover, more preferred grasses, better biodiversity, less weed infestation, more productivity, and therefore more tolerance of the plants in a dry year. The thing is, the reason why producers don't adopt rotational grazing as much is just because it's so intensive in terms of how much labor it takes, and also resources. If you are a producer who wants to implement rotational grazing, you need to invest into water management, into better fencing. It takes more time. It's complicated to manage because now you need to have some sort of a grazing plan in place, and it's hard, right? So there are many challenges, and one of the challenges are while producers adopt rotational grazing, they don't get compensated for it. So in the last phrase here, the last sentence, any producer can say that they don't know any rancher who's paid for sequestering carbon. And the reason for it is just basically technological and financial barriers. So there's an opportunity in terms of what we can do and what the market producers who adopt rotational grazing can get into. Edward Bork, a professor at the U of A, in a recent paper, he quantified that up to $3 billion in carbon credits can be acquired by producers who adopt rotational grazing in Alberta. Obviously, that's over a period of a number of years, and I believe it's more than 10 years, and it is based on the assumption that carbon credits will be worth around $170 dollars per ton of carbon. There's lots of assumptions, but anyway, the idea is that there's a huge opportunity for producers to make money, to be compensated for something that they will have to invest in by having to spend money on water management, on grazing management, and infrastructure for fencing and all those things. So as I said, there's lots of challenges related to implementing rotational grazing. It requires moving animals at higher frequencies. It requires improved fencing, like you need to buy energizers, batteries, solar panels, and all those things. You need to improve your watering systems with extended water lines, water troughs, and pumps. And all of that takes money, especially if you want to start implementing that all at once. Takes thousands of dollars just to go through each one of those things, especially if you have a big land and you need to have extensive water lines and extensive fences. So to make it easier for producers to implement rotational grazing, there is certain ways that you can use technology to help you. For water management, for instance, you can use water level sensors, so that if you have your cows out in the pasture for an extended period of time and you don't want to check on the water every day, you can use water level sensors to tell you on your cell phone or in your computer whether the water in a given water trough is at a good height. For fencing management, there are energizer sensors that you can use to remotely know whether your electric fence is working, whether it's in circuit, whether there's an issue. You can also use activity ear tags to see whether your animals are in good health, whether they're stressed, whether there is a problem with a calf. There's a lot of information that can be acquired from activity ear tags. Also, for managing your pasture, you can use graze meters to better have an idea of how much pasture there is in a paddock before versus after cows are moved into and out of a pasture. For annual management, you can also use virtual fencing. So there's all these technologies that we know that producers could potentially use, and those are the technologies that we've been focusing on validating at the Technology Access Center in Oates College. And I'm going to talk a bit about some of these technologies. And on top of these technologies, we also want to know whether there are ways to make it easier for producers to access carbon credits markets, whether to quantify the carbon, but also to verify the BMP, the rotational grazing practice that is in place, which is something that's required in carbon credits protocols. So in order to validate all these technologies, we deployed them in what we call the Pitstra land, which you can see here. It's 320 acres. We divided it into multiple paddocks, multiple pastures. Each pasture is subdivided into multiple paddocks, and then we rotationally graze almost the entirety of this land. And then we rotationally graze it, and we deployed multiple technologies in it. And we continually assess soil health and other economical parameters related to the implementation of rotational grazing in this land. So as you can see here, that's how we subdivide the land into multiple paddocks. So you can see that it's pretty intense in the way we chose to do it. And it's more to show producers that it is possible to do as long as you have the correct technologies in place to help you. So one of the things we're testing is virtual fencing. So virtual fencing, for those of you who are not familiar, it's basically a collar that you put on cows, and then you control whether the cow should go beyond the boundary or not. You set up a boundary of a pasture. And as you can see on the picture here, there is a battery on the collar. And if the cow moves past a certain boundary that you set up on your phone or on your computer, the cow gets an audio sign. And then if the cow doesn't change direction once she hears the audio sign, then she's gonna get shocked. Over time, the cow learns that in order not to get shocked, whenever she hears the audio, she needs to change direction. So this technology comes from Norway. This is a Norway-based company called No Fence. We brought it here. We tested using only 4 collars. We're on the way to getting 80 additional collars to start a larger trial during the summer of this season. But last summer we tested just the 4 collars we had, and this is what we did. We put the cows into a fenced area, which is represented here in blue. That's an actual physical fence. And then we changed the virtual boundary of the pasture, the virtual pasture, in 2 days. On days 1 and 2, you can see the first boundary here, and then on the second boundary on days 3 and 4. And we noticed that the cows, they respect a lot of the boundary. They know over a short period of time that they should behave according to the stimuli that they get, both the audio and the electric stimuli. The only thing that we noticed as well is that one of the days that was really cloudy, we got random audio and electric stimuli. So that's something that should be further investigated. We're giving a feedback to the company in regards to that, so that they should look more into it, because we obviously don't want that happening. But over the period of 4 days, we didn't have any other issue with the collars. So here you can see the data on the 4 cows that we did. In yellow, you can see the number of audio signs that each cow got, and in red, the number of shocks. So you can see that on day 1, 2 to 4, the number on day 1 and 2, the number of audio and shocks, they vary a bit. On day 3, that's when we got a stormy day, and then cows got wild and got shocked, and it was interesting to see that. But then on the day 4, you can see that none of the cows got shocked, and some of them only got the audio sign. So it was interesting to see that over a period of 4 days, cows learned how to behave according to the collar. And it's even better than what the company wants us to do, because the company has said that they want cows to train for at least 7 days on the collars, and we got these results with only 4 days. So it's pretty interesting. It's a good sign. Right now, there is another trial going with those 4 collars. There's a producer out of Stettler that's working with us. He has some corn, and then we put the 4 heifers in that corn area. Then we're grazing that corn. And so far, the reason why we did that was that we wanted to know whether the battery life of the collars would drop because of the winter. So far, we haven't had any issues at all with the battery. Actually, it's surprisingly good. Even in foggy days, the battery was going up, because the battery do have solar panels on the side that's supposed to keep charging the collars. So the battery worked well in the summer, and now also it's working very well. So we're going to continue evaluating that. The results from this trial during the winter is going to come up at some point in the next few months, and then we're going to report on it for producers. And also we're gonna get all those other 80 colors, and we're gonna continue giving feedback on it. There's other technologies that we deployed at Pitstro as well. So this one, probably a good amount of people are working. You probably know about this. This is the Sundog solar system. It's a portable water system that we use in our pastures. We just whenever we need to move cows from one side to the other, we just move this. We haven't had any issue. The battery life works well, the pump works well, and this we recommend the use of this for producers. Another thing we tested was the fence energizer sensor, what we call the EF node. This is an Australian company. They sent this over to us. We tested it. When this technology gets deployed, it works well. The problem was in getting it deployed because it required a lot of programming in terms of getting it to actually run. So we do not recommend this, just because even we had issues in getting this deployed, let alone producers. So that's our role to tell producers whether a certain technology is worth or not. Another thing we're doing right now is calibrating the graze meter. So the graze meter is basically this thing. It's basically a stick that you put on the ground, and then it measures in real time how much available biomass you have per acre. So you go walking along the pasture, and then they call it plunk. You plunk it on the ground, and then it gives you on the display how much biomass you have in any given pasture. You do need to adjust it depending on the pasture, on the kind of grass that you have, on the species or varieties. So this thing came from New Zealand. It was calibrated for New Zealand conditions. What we're doing right now is we're calibrating it for our pastures in Alberta. So we have collected a number of samples that we're using to create the equations that will later be available for producers who want to use this technology. This is really easy to use. You just, as you go walking on the pasture, you just put it on the ground and you can collect data in real time. Doesn't take too much time, more than just a common walking. Another thing we tested also was activity year tags. So in these activity year tags that we used from Allflex, they're mostly used in the dairy industry. They're good for the dairy industry, and we found that they're not as good for beef, just because the nature of the vastness of pastures compared to a feedlot where dairy cows need to be placed in. So we were actually able to monitor the cows, but we had a lot of connectivity issues, just because this had to be placed in a water trough. Whenever cows came to drink on the trough, the ear tag would give us information on that cow along the day. But if the cow didn't come to the water for whichever reason, for sickness or not, then we wouldn't get data on that cow, which would still inform us that the cow was not doing very well, and we would need to check. But the main thing was we had a lot of issues between the router that we used for this and the cell phone network. So for that reason, we're still not sure if this is a good alternative for producers. We'll continue investigating on other activity year tags that are probably more proper for grazing settings. And that's what we're gonna do in future projects. But this is what we finished testing, and that's what we found. We are also testing technologies that can help producers manage their water system. One system that we're using is called the Farm Simple. This comes from Saskatchewan. It's very simple to use. You can see in red here is the buoyant that you put on the water. this is solar powered, uses cell phone frequency. It sends us texts, as you can see, or emails. We deployed this at Pitstra. We haven't had any issues with this at all. This is one of the simplest technologies we have, and this is one of the ones that I like the most, just for its simplicity. It costs not too much. It's around $900, everything included, including an antenna to make the signal better. And you pay $10 a month just on the subscription, and which can be canceled after you're done with the grazing season. And that subscription is just to use the cell phone tower from Telos or whichever company you need. And then another one that we're using is RanchBot. This is from Australia. This is also for water management and everything else. There's a lot of other things that you can connect to it. You can connect cameras in case you have cows that are out in the pasture it's hard to get to, and you want to see whether the cows are doing well or not. You can connect cameras to it. This can connect through cell phone or satellite. So even in very remote areas, you can get this working. You can connect soil moisture sensors. You can connect fence energizer sensors to it. This is a very comprehensive technology. This is one of the things that we also like a lot. One of the technologies we like a lot, just because we can connect a number of devices to it. Wirelessly, you can connect up to 20, if I remember correctly, and you can also wire up to 5 sensors to it. So there's 2 ways to connect sensors to this system, wirelessly or through a wire, as you can see here in this picture. So all these things, they take money, right? It's hard to buy and to quantify how much you would spend on just each one of these technologies. So one of the ways that we think producers will probably be able to get into these technologies is by getting into carbon credits. And we are working with a company called Carbon Asset Solutions. So what they do is they use this trailer here that has a gamma ray generator on it that emits radiation towards the soil, and then it detects how much radiation is emitted back. It's not a big amount, so it doesn't harm the soil. And based on that, we can quantify how much carbon there is in the soil up to a 30-centimeter depth. The company that does this, Carbon Asset Solutions, they don't charge anything to producers. They just get into a certain percentage of whatever carbon credits producers acquire. So producers don't spend a dime. Obviously, they have their own requirements in terms of what practices they want producers to implement, and there's a certain contract in terms of over how much time that certain practice should be in place, so that a certain number of carbon credits should be sequestered. We're working on validating this technology in terms of a rotational grazing system. So we want to know if by implementing a rotational grazing system in some of our pastures and using this, we're able to quantify short and mid-term changes in soil organic carbon just by using this. And whatever data comes out of it, we're going to report obviously to producers, but it will be, we believe, to the benefit of the industry as a whole, both to Carbon Asset Solutions, but also to producers and even to the government. Another thing too that we're working is with the verification of practice, because in carbon credit protocols, there's 2 things. One, you have to quantify how much carbon is sequestered, and the other one is to verify whether the practice that the producer says that is in place, such as rotational grazing, is actually in place for a number of years, let's say 10 years over the period of the contract. So we're using hyperlayer data from Wyvern, which is a company based in Alberta, to see if we can use hyperspectral imagery from their satellites to remotely verify whether rotational grazing practices are in place. And we believe that this will make it easier for producers to get into carbon credit protocols, just as carbon asset solution does with the quantification of carbon. And just so you know, there are some government initiatives out there that help producers implement rotational grazing to buy or improve infrastructure, improve pastures, and this kind of things. Off-CAF currently gives up to $75,000 per producer who wants to implement rotational grazing. And in the future, money that's in carbon credits will also be made available for producers. And there is a ballpark number of $170 per ton of carbon by 2030. We don't know if that's going to be the exact number that's practiced by industry, but that's a good number to start with if we want to incentivize producers. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Bob, and let me know if you have any questions at the end of Bob's presentation.
Thanks, Laio. Just getting set up here.
Just let me, okay.
While Bob gets set up, I'll do a quick little introduction. So Bob is passionate about mapping technologies. Since starting with Olds College in 2002, Bob has taught hundreds of land and agriculture students how to navigate and collect data with GPS, create maps, and analyze spatial information, and perform statistical analysis. He has a Bachelor of Science in Geography and Environmental Studies, a certificate in GIS from NATE, and is a graduate of the Chair Leadership Academy. Bob currently serves as a program curriculum chair of the Land and Water Resources Diploma program with the Werklund School of Agriculture Technology at Olds College of Agriculture and Technology. Bob is currently involved in multiple drone and ag research projects with the Olds College Smart Farm, and performs some consulting in GIS and remote sensing. Bob is currently working on obtaining his advanced drone pilot certificates. Welcome, Bob.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. And thank you everyone for attending today. It's my job here today to hopefully inspire you to think about applying some drone technologies to your farm, to your pasture management. Yeah, really appreciated Laio's presentation. Good job. Just very quickly, I do teach other courses besides drones. I teach some statistics and mapping and AutoCAD type courses. I've been with the college for a number of years now, and it's been a great role. So what is it? Is it a drone? That's the most commonly accepted phrase or term for what we are talking about today. It can have some negative connotations when you think of sort of drones being used in war and science fiction movies and things like that. RPAS is actually the official title that Canada has adopted as a government for managing this kind of aircraft, remotely piloted aircraft system. It's the favorite term that they have. You might hear other terms like UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle. That's a very common one sort of among industry and researchers and tech geeks. And then other people will say UAS, unmanned aerial system. So these all mean the same thing. So just be aware of that when you're reading things in the news or on websites. There's lots of drones out there. I think we know how much this has been taking off over the last few years. We've been using a lot of small ones and then some larger ones. We have some fixed wings like you see here. We have the M600. We have all the drones here except for this cool $500,000 drone from SAIT, where we did a project with them. But starting out small is definitely a great way to introduce yourself to the technology. And it might only be as much as $500, $400 even to get a drone where you can do video mapping and actually even make accurate maps to use on your farm and using a GIS. Just remember, every drone needs a way to take off, and usually needs, that's usually batteries, although there are fuel-based systems out there as well. If you have the fuel, then now you're adding the extra weight for that, but some of the batteries take quite a bit of weight as well. Of course, you have GPS to kind of keep things flying and in the right spot. And of course, lots of cameras and sensors to do the work that you're interested in doing, whether it's just straight old video and pictures from above, or maybe some higher end sensors for things like multispectral and doing vegetation health mapping. So the sensors can certainly add about half the cost of the drone itself very quickly. And sometimes you're seeing more and more drones have a payload where they are carrying things, whether that's chemicals or other types of payloads, seeds even. These are some of the sensors that Olds College has, and you may find yourself recognizing some of these. These are relatively expensive sensors. Some of them cost many thousands of dollars, like this LiDAR sensor, which is for laser scanning for making topographic maps. But some are less expensive, like the Red Edge MX Dual that's been out for some time, which is a great sensor for vegetation health mapping and is used quite extensively for that. Things like weed detection as well. You can get into thermal cameras, this XT2 camera that you mount on a drone. So you need a little bigger drone than like a Mavic 2 Pro to mount these sensors. And of course, you need a kind of sensor that does RGB camera work, or just red, green, blue, just visible spectrum camera. So how can drones be used in pasture management? Start small, and then we'll move our way down. So just farm flyovers and scouting, mapping your farm, so getting an accurate picture of where everything is located, including your facilities and fence lines and everything that you have going on out there. That would be a 3D map as well, with topography and your other facilities. Big piece of drone work in pasture management would be monitoring vegetation health and tracking the health, and even like predicting the potential yield of a field in terms of tons per acre. Tracking animals and observing your animals, and even calculating volumes if you have large operations that maybe include extensive manure development. You can do drones to track and calculate the volume of manure that you're producing, and make some more calculations for how you will use that. And even surface drainage analysis if you need to make some modifications to your field. So it starts out usually with people flying, their drones over their fields, and getting, these beautiful images like you see of our Pittstra field at Olds College. And just even this is just a wonderful way to use, a $400 drone to be able to inspect your land from far away. You don't have to be out there. If it's wet, you can use the drone to get above and not make tracks with your quad and whatnot. So that's one great way of just getting started with drones. It does help you see the variation. You can use it as a benchmark for next season. And it's just an aspect of sharing your farm as well with others. Could get a little more sophisticated and use drones to fly to specific areas, maybe with GPS points programmed in to understand trouble spots that you might be having in your fields with water, with crop development or pasture development, and just even how the animals are grazing your fields on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So scouting your fields just with a little more intent with your flying is another great way to get started. Moving forward from that, we're talking a lot here today about flying a mission, which is really just a robotic flight that happens over top of your pasture, and you program in where you want your flight to happen. And of course, you're trying to fly in decent weather and things like that. which can be an issue sometimes. But really the part of flying and making maps with drones is very simple. I think people would be surprised, even with a $400 drone, what you can do and the kind of maps that you can make with it. So it's really just like setting up a zone, and the mission software will come up with a suggested overlap of flights, and you basically press a button and your drone takes off and does its mission. And hopefully you have enough batteries. If you have to do it with 2 sets of batteries, well, that's okay as well. We have a fixed wing, which is a little different. This is something that is completely autonomous. You have to fly it with a laptop, and those things, the first time you do this, it's a little scary. You wonder, oh, how am I don't really have control of this aircraft, but it's never failed us. It has a geofence when you fly it, so anything goes wrong, it's just going to circle a few times and come back down and land. So when we do this kind of mapping, which is again one of the most common uses of a drone when it comes to really any application, but certainly in agriculture or in pasture management, you would fly your map and you would get your images back. And initially, the most common thing you're going to create is this image here called an orthomosaic, where you're stitching together, the hundreds of images that it collected from above. And it's possible then to really look at your field in free mapping software. You can zero in on what's happening in your field. You can probably most likely see patches of weeds, even possibly identify certain types of plants if your resolution is good enough, and just get a full flavor of your field. This is an example of what the imagery would look like if you're initially loading it into some processing software. And you can see all the point clouds that are underneath and the original kind of position of all those images. And so beyond making the ortho image, you can make this digital surface model, which is for topographic analysis. It's just giving you a full map of your field in terms of 3-dimensional topography. So we could have a contour layer on there that you might be more familiar with in terms of mapping. But ultimately, you're seeing where the water is going to flow in your field. The highs and the lows, part of your field might be dry every 3 or 4 years, but then other years it might come along and get wet again. So doing this kind of work really helps you understand the year to year variability that's going on in your fields from a wetness point of view, and just where the water is going to go. And of course, this technology can be used to just create boundaries, just like other GPS methods that you're probably familiar with equipment. The drone technology, once you have these images, they are like map ready, like they are in a real coordinate system, so that when you're looking at them in the free software, you're able to measure things and make boundaries. And so boundary making is certainly a possibility with drone data, and a fundamental piece, of course, to just planning out your rotations, if that's what you're doing, or just your fields, how you're going to use them, how many acres is each field, and what's your plan. So that's a really big part of drone use there. Moving away from that kind of visible spectrum, we have sensors that can detect other non-visible spectrums. So things like the red edge and near infrared can detect the vegetation health and the amount of vegetation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with some research that was done. There's actually something called hyperspectral cameras beyond just these multispectral, which means more than 3 bands. Hyperspectral could be 10, 20, 30 bands of data being gathered. And those are certainly more expensive and a little more leading or bleeding edge when it comes to some of these applications we're talking about. But I'm sure you've heard of, near NDVI, near difference vegetation indices before, and you've maybe seen these funny colored maps. And what they're trying to show is really productive zones of growing vegetation versus unproductive or even dead zones. So we have an index here that's really from -1 to +1, and this is from a combination of those non-visible spectrum sensors that we were just mentioning there. And you can create maps like this that show kind of your productive pasture zones or forage zones. In this case, the red areas were certainly like, well, there's virtually no vegetation on those zones. There was some, I believe, some soil tillage going on actually in those areas. And then in other parts of this field, you can see some productive and some unproductive. We actually did a project to use this kind of technology over the last few years. Laio and Sean Thompson, Alex Melnichuk, and my other partner, George Gake at the college, he's our drone lead, did some work where they wanted to see if they could predict the biomass that was forming in hayfields and in some rotational grazing areas using drones and using satellites as well. I'll focus mostly on the drone part. As you probably know, predicting available pasture or hay is usually done through guessing and personal experience, and this can be a bit biased. We're talking about a 70% accuracy for this kind of sort of non-data collected method. Hay is commonly cut in periods in which nutritional value is less than ideal, and producers are often unsure of how many grazing days are left and how many days are available in the next pasture where the cattle are going to go. So these kinds of questions of predicting how many days you have left in a field and how many left in the one you're about to send your animals to. So we wanted to try and determine the accuracy and viability of using drone and satellite imagery to estimate pasture and hay yield, and increasing on-farm production efficiency. This would allow for better timing for your rotations and enabling the producers to choose optimal hay cut times based on these production targets. So just a little more background about this particular research done in 2020, but carried on in 2021 and 2022 as well in different capacities. First step is to sort of identify the productivity zones within each field. So there's about 5 or 6 zones that you identify in terms of productivity. This is not unlike kind of prescription zones that are identified for cropping. And we then collect forage samples in each zone. So two on the ground forage samples collected. Samples were dried, and dried biomass data is used to calibrate the imagery predictions. So just remember though that just a bit of background about NDVI and how that works. The green plants reflect much of the near infrared light and very little of the red light. That's why they appear green. And so that's a higher NDVI number, like 0.72, while brown plants or vegetation that's on the way out reflect more red light and less near infrared light. And by taking the ratio of red and near infrared, we can get this vegetation greenness. So here's a picture of some of the forage samples that were being collected and correlated to the different productivity zones. And you can see the greens down to reds there. So the lower productivity in red and the higher in green. And so you can even visually see that, how that looked on the ground. So what you're doing then is correlating across the entire zone then your estimates that you have for your NDVI and how that can be applied directly to an estimated yield in each zone area. And so each zone has its own kind of productivity rating based on your kind of source NDVI, and you can apply then and correlate that across the field. It's amazing how accurate this was. Basically about 95%, 95% accuracy for each of the methods, whether it was the satellite images or the drone images being used to predict yield in this way, to predict biomass. And we were really impressed with that. This is just another example of on the pasture changes and detecting the changes in the different rotational paddocks there. So June 26th to July 17th. So there was some intensive grazing going on, obviously, between June 26th and July 17th. And you can see that very much reflected in the legend there of biomass indicator. So ultimately, between the two techniques here, between satellite and drone, the scalability of the satellite image is very high because you can obviously get that data fairly quickly. It's Sentinel-2 imagery. It's free data. It just doesn't have the resolution that the drone data has. So it's not as accurate on small fields, say. The drone image, you can't fly thousands of acres like you could cover that with a satellite image. So that's not as scalable. Sometimes the satellites have some issues with clouds and cloud cover. The drone can help with that by getting underneath the clouds. And definitely more data processing required on the drone side versus the satellite side. So both have their pros and cons with this technique. And yeah, pretty excited. Could ask Laio more about that here too. Pretty excited about this kind of approach to estimation. Okay, some other quick ideas here. This is something we've been doing more on the crops side, but no reason it couldn't be done with your hay and pasture fields. And that is simply estimating heights of your plants. And so we've been doing this for the last few years, where we take drone images before the crops are planted and then after, or at different stages. And you're able to estimate crop heights, which of course is a fundamental indicator of growth and ultimately yield. Another one that we've played with is thermal imagery, and thermal imagery is known to be good for detecting moisture deficiencies. So the hotter, more exposed, less vegetated areas are going to show up warmer than the denser areas in the field where there's more plants. The soil is a little wetter, things are a little bit cooler. And so thermal imagery can be a great way of sort of doing mid-season checks on whether your grasses are drying out, essentially. Another project we've been working on, again, it could be applied to a pasture situation, and that is detecting damage in your fields. So this is a project that we've been working on with Ag Financial Services Corporation, using manual and semi-automation techniques to assess damage of hail damage in fields. And so hail damage would also occur in pastures. And so this technique could be applied to damage compensation as well. Just getting in on sort of the mapping side of things, this is where you might use drones to assist in making maps of your farm, detailed maps that will show, where everything is located. And yes, it's a little bit of GIS skill here, but you can click on your maps and see the status of what kind of fences you have, how big your fields are. And as you grow and develop your farm, you can add other layers to this, use it as a planning tool for your farm. Just let me get back to this here. Sorry about that. There's many other applications like that I've worked on just with my background in mapping. And so you can have a drone image and again, get into some detailed facility maps and use these for planning and for tracking. Not to mention building an environmental farm plan. Maps can be a very important part of the environmental farm plan, although not necessarily officially required. They certainly aid the farmer and the producer in their planning. And so if that's something you're wanting to do, then drones could very much help you get your farm plan underway and completed. Some other kind of odds and sods where drones are just able to do some things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And this map here is with a $400 Mavic Mini, where we wanted to estimate the manure that we had been building up here in the fall. And so we went and had some students fly these sites, and they went and then calculated the volume of manure that was present in all of these pens, just to give you a quick idea of what these sort of maps look like when you generate them initially. This is kind of like what drone data looks like in 3D when you have the data in a viewer like this. So you can see that everything is in 3D. So there's nothing stopping me from being able to kind of measure those piles there, which is exactly what had to be done. Sorry, I'm having to do this here. I've got a little blockage in my screen there. And you could measure your silage in the same way if you weren't sure how much you had left. That's another volume calculation that drones can do. And of course, just observing animals and observing your livestock. You know, you might be quite a ways away from your animals. They might be in kind of a wet zone, a little bit inaccessible. So you might decide to fly a drone and do a check. And so this is just an example of that kind of video that can happen here. Just checking in, and any of the flights that I've done in this way has never seemed to disturb the animals in any way. So it's quite amazing how far you can get with the drone there and not disturb them. Thermal imagery is being combined with animal tracking. That is kind of on the bleeding edge for sure, but I think at some point you will see solutions where you're going to have a kind of combination of technologies being thrown out there to monitor animals in this way and to get some very reliable feedback in the field situation, not so much in the feedlot situation like you're seeing here, in a field situation where animals are more widely dispersed. And if you have some issues with drainage and need to maybe solve some of those, you could get some maps made with drones that would assist in identifying where to assist with some of that drainage that could be a problem. Of course, you need all your permits for that as well. And weed spraying, although not common yet, and certainly not even regulated yet, we're still in the experimental stage. So when you hear about weed spraying going on with drones, that is strictly on a kind of special permit basis. We are not at the point where drones are doing this from an industrial point of view, but it's coming, and you could see how this could be part of a range management toolbox as well. So many uses here. Other things I didn't mention, but I mean, just checking your fence lines. In the coming years, we will get into a situation, what's called the beyond visual line of sight, where drones will be able to be flown outside of your visual sight. And so that's starting to imply things like long fence line checks and checking on your animals a few fields away and things like that. The drones can do it already. It's just we don't have the regulations in place to manage that. Even herding animals is something that has been tried quite a bit in New Zealand with drones. Some of my students were reporting to me checking their farm equipment function and operations. So having kind of a drone shadow equipment that is in operation to see how it's functioning and what might be going wrong with it. Documenting emergencies on the farm, farm security, intruders, trespassers, just doing your annual inspection videos with a drone to kind of keep your fields, a catalog or a record of your fields. And of course, just teaching each other and society about how agriculture works are other ways that drones could be used on the farm. So we are at Olds College, well down this path of trying to use these technologies. We do see that they have potential to complement the on-farm, vegetation, livestock facilities monitoring, and we are going to continue to investigate drone and other kinds of technologies to enhance pasture, livestock, and farm management. What could be your next steps, I suppose, is doing some regulations, looking at some regulations, taking some training, becoming a certified pilot. That's just simply a test that you need to take in order to pass to become a certified pilot. Essentially, anytime you're using a drone for any kind of commercial operation, which a farm would qualify for that, you should be a certified pilot. Purchasing drones and then start flying your fields, videos, get videos, pictures, and start even trying to make some maps. So I have some more slides that we can show if there's questions about it, but right now I think we'll entertain some questions for both Laio and myself. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thanks, Bob. And Laio, the technology is, I find it quite fascinating these days, just because how far advanced we're going. So we have a few questions here. Let me see here. We had something come up in the chat. So from Carol for Laio, oh, I just lost it. What kind of cost is this no fence technology?
It's around $340 per collar, Canadian dollars. And on top of that, you pay a subscription fee that's for the first year is around $60, just to use, you know, the cell network capabilities. And then after the first year, you get into a per use basis, meaning that you can just pay for the summer months that you use the collars. So if it's 4 months, I'm assuming it's around $5 per month. So that's what you're gonna pay. So only the first year is more expensive in terms of the subscription fee. And then if you wanna have extra batteries, then you pay on top of that. It's around $60 per battery, but you don't necessarily need to buy extra batteries. It's just in case you lose one or something happens.
And touching on the batteries, what's the battery life on those collars? You know?
So just the collar comes with solar panels on both sides of the collar. Just the battery itself is supposed to last for 2 months without any sunlight, but because of the solar panels, they're supposed to last as long as you have sunlight. And in our experience, now we have the collars deployed in the field. It's been a few weeks now. We had pretty foggy days and pretty cold days, and the collars were still going up in their battery even when it was foggy. So we were quite surprised. We weren't actually expecting that, and the batteries didn't drop as much during the cold days in terms of their how much they store, because we know that in cold days batteries are not supposed to work as well. And I believe because the collars come from Norway, and in Norway it can get pretty cold, they are already supposed to work in very harsh conditions.
Okay.
I noticed Kiana had a question about drones in more forested areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have colleagues in BC that are using drones extensively in their forestry applications. I don't see there being any specific problems. Obviously, you're going to want to fly the drones maybe a little bit higher than you would normally fly, but no, drones in forested applications should be fine. It's not like it's going to be a GPS signal issue or anything like that. You're most likely going to have the drone up in the air. It's going to see lots of GPS. You're going to be able to see it. So remember, we still are in, visual line of sight flying at this point is really the regulations for sure.
Continue with, I see Carol put, have you used any of this type of technology for estimating wildlife damage in crop? Yeah, no, we were just doing a project with AFSC, and actually AFSC themselves have their own system for estimating wildlife damage, which involves algorithms that look for pathways through the crop. So literally, like, you can see where the deer
have been walking through fields, and there's an algorithm that'll look at the drone or satellite image and basically automatically digitize lines through your fields, and then go and do an estimate, apply some fudge factors to estimate how much field is damaged from all of this animal activity. So yeah, that kind of stuff really does exist.
People asked things in the chat as well as in the Q&As.
Yeah, so I'm looking for one in the queue. Oh, here it is. Natalie. So she asked, for the carbon market piece, what is your sense of the availability of good indicators that would allow farmers and ranchers to participate in the C market using grazing, and how far away are we from having those measures?
That's a very good question. There are already voluntary markets if you want to get into the carbon credits market. Depending on the protocol that you get into, it depends on the sampling methodology, varies from one company to the other, but they all use just soil organic carbon as the indicator. They actually measure. There are other proxies that can potentially be used, such as above ground biomass as a proxy of below ground biomass. For that kind of thing, you need to ground truth your data still, but I believe we are already in a spot where these indicators are used. The only thing is the scalability of it is still fairly low compared to what I believe we could get to. But with the deployment of new technologies such as carbon acid solutions and other things like hyperspectral imaging, we could potentially scale it more so that more producers can get access to the market at a lower cost or no cost at all.
And then Matthew Gosling in the Q&A portion there, will the Canadian carbon market have a saleable carbon when there's no standard way of measuring the change of it in the soil?
Yeah, I believe so. Although we don't have a standard protocol that is regulated by the government, we do have voluntary markets, and we do have some what we call aggregators that are part of it. One of them is, for instance, Blue Source. There is Versco, I believe that's how you pronounce it. They are part of the voluntary market, and they use their own methodology to measure carbon. So although there is no standard, they probably don't use the same number of samples. They probably don't use this per acre. They probably don't use the same lab analysis methods. They all point towards measuring carbon in the soil as a result of changes in practice. And at the end of the day, that's what producers are looking for, right? In terms of being compensated for what they produce, no matter how that's measured. The only thing is, obviously, some methods could generate results that are different from others. And that's where we come into, right? Which is invalidating how accurate those methodologies are. And when I say we, is just like as an applied research institution.
And then I don't know if you saw the other question there, Bob, from Daphne in the chat there.
Oh yeah, the weed spraying. Yeah. Yeah, I was just doing a check on that. I mean, it's going to happen. It's there's lots of special permits being given out each year to drone companies to continue to try the spraying. Of course, you're seeing it at drone conferences. I don't have a date as to when that is going to be approved commercially, though. Sorry, but it is just a matter of time. They're working on, so there's a bunch of angles here. Like it's not just about the drones. It's about the drift. It's about the specific chemicals that people will be wanting to spray. So it's almost going to be done like on a chemical by chemical basis, where different chemicals will be evaluated for their safety in drone operations, and then they will be like those specific chemicals will be approved. So it's under the pesticide regs for sure, as much as it is under Transport Canada.
Well, that's good. I think that was all the oh, no, there's one more.
Yes, contact information. Sure, I'll just put it in here as an email.
And I believe some Daphne Cruz asked about the colors, the sound the colors make.
Yeah.
So they get pretty loud. So once a cow gets close to a boundary, the collars start low, and then they get progressively louder as the cow doesn't change direction, up to 85 decibels, and it's a beep that lasts very short periods of time, and then it goes and gets faster, slower actually, and louder. So it is a good incentive for the cow, even for us, as we're close to the collar. It's a pretty annoying. It's a good incentive for the cow. Someone else asked about nutrient management, rated setas or rakeed setas.
Yeah, so yeah, good morning all. My question is, what are the challenges the nutrient management are facing? Thank you.
So I believe he's asking in terms of nutrient management, at least when it comes to grazing management, nutrient management is very related to it. So if you as a producer are overgrazing your pastures, you are facing a problem with nutrients in your soil, because as your pastures get overgrazed continuously year over year, you're losing organic matter. As you lose organic matter, you're losing roots, so your roots are not as deep anymore, and because organic matter, they have the ability to get nutrients to adhere to its surface. It retains nutrients. Once you lose organic matter, you also lose nutrients. So it's crucial for ranchers that they correctly manage their soils through some sort of rotational grazing, so that they don't overgraze their soils and face issues in relation to the impoverishment of their soils.
That is all the questions. Let's see here. I'd like to thank Bob and Laio for joining us today. You guys, I find the technology portion really fascinating with the use of drones. Even the collar one, I found that really fascinating, and I look forward to what we have going on in the future here. Thank everybody for joining us today. Please join us again next Monday, February 6th at 10 o'clock for our last webinar, where we will have Trevor Walsh from Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation presenting on an alternative to spreading manure on snow and minimizing environmental impact where there is no alternative, and Kevin Seward from NRCB presenting on NRCB process for winter manure spreading. Thanks, everybody.